Morning. I decided to change out uh, needles. I was using my faithful 9014 Schmetz Universal, and I wanted to try because I haven't tried them for a while. I'll show you. I haven't tried these embroidery needles for a while by Schmetz, and these are a little bit smaller needle. They're 75 by 11. Usually using 90 by 14, so a few sizes smaller, but it's designed specifically for embroidery. And one of the great features of the PFAFF 230, if you didn't know it, is it's got some fun embroidery style stitches. We're not going to be doing a lot of them today because of a time frame that I have to work with. But this is what the stitch card looks like for this particular machine if you've never seen it before. And this also covers the models 332 and 338 as well. Now, the good news is if you don't have access to a stitch card like this that allows you to do dual needle sewing and then also single needle sewing on the other side, sound is garbled. Oh my goodness. And this is the brand new camera. How does the sound, how is the sound right now when there's no music playing? Just curious. How is the sound right now? Somebody give me some feedback on sound with no music playing. So here's the issue with these Razor cameras. I'm going to set this stitch card down for a second. This is my old camera right here, which is quite a nice camera. It's got a little light ring on it and everything. If I'm getting into some darker spaces and I'm wanting to show that, these Razor cameras are really top shelf. But apparently there's a software issue where depending on your laptop, I'm running it through my laptop right now, depending on your laptop, it might choose the wrong driver for the camera. And I've got to do more research on that. But it also has a feature that muffles out excessive noise. And I think when it detects that music in the background with this camera, it's trying to muffle it out. And then it's muffling me out at the same time. So even though I have a great love for music, we might have to go music free for a while because us being able to communicate is more important than having a little bit of music playing in the background. You can turn music on at your place and enjoy it there while you're watching this live stream if you'd like. And I'll hum to myself is kind of what I'll do. So what I explained that I was working on real quick is I had a 9014 needle in here, my go-to needle by Schmetz. I wanted to try this embroidery needle today since we're going to be doing some of these patterns up here at the top of the stitch wheel. They're a little bit more intricate. It'll really put this machine to the test, and I'd like to give those a go. I don't have a lot of sew-offs set up today, so I might have to cut some as we're doing the live stream, and you'll just have to be patient with me as we do that. The other thing I wanted to talk about on this machine, let me move this old needle to the side. The other thing I wanted to talk about in this machine is that it comes in a couple of different styles as it was going through its evolutionary development with the PFAFF Sewing Machine Company. And by that, I mean, when I posted the shots of this machine going through its extensive motor work, I'm going to show that to you quick if you didn't catch it for whatever reason. This machine arrived from South Carolina. It must have been stored in a pretty cool spot when it came to dampness. Or maybe those of you that know more about South Carolina than I do, maybe South Carolina is just a real damp place, kind of like certain regions of Florida. have a lot of humidity issues. But the motor was in the worst condition I've ever seen a motor before come through the workshop. A combination of wiring degraded, rust infestation in the motor that was just crazy off the charts. Let me see if I can find those pictures real quick and show them to you, because you may not have seen them for whatever reason. Let's see here. Give me a second here. I'm kind of scrolling. I don't realize how much I post on Facebook until I sometimes go to Facebook and I try to find something. And I've even asked, I've asked Paula and I've asked Emma before for help, because it's like, I cannot find this post that I did, but I know I did it. I'm getting closer, I think. Okay, here it is, finally. So I'm just going to kind of show these to you if somehow you missed them. I'm going to set it up against the machine here. I'll get a little bit closer, and then I'll show you some of these pictures. Yeah, that's a pretty good shot. I think you can see it pretty well. Oh, and let me say good morning to everybody first, too. And again, if you've got either a PFAFF 230, 332, or a 338, really also 130 as well. On this channel, under playlists, I've got those stitch cards. I literally took a stitch card like this, and I went frame by frame and took a picture of the setting for every stitch pattern on the card, both for single needle and for dual needle as well. And at the beginning of this live stream, I put the link for the stitch card for this PFAFF 230, and then also it covers the PFAFF 332 and the 338 as well. So if you've been at a loss, if you either have a model 230, 332, or a 338, and you go, boy, I wish I could maximize this machine, but I don't know what the stitch settings are to access the stitch patterns that are built into this machine, you can know now. And you don't have to go slide by slide and go, okay, I'm going to wait for this one to come back. You can scroll back and forth and find exactly the stitch pattern that you want to sew, and it'll show you the setting, just like it does in this little window right here. It'll show you the set straight away, so you'll know what to set your machine to in order to get that stitch pattern that you want. But let me first of all, just real quick, because I like to show you where the machine was at and where it's at now comparatively. So, oh, and I'll say hello to everybody first. I'm so scattered today. So scattered. So here we go. Let's see. Oh, we've got a couple of our moderator leaders here as well. So when I get into these live streams, I get distracted and I get immersed in what I'm doing with the machine. So if you run into questions or in any way, reach out to Paula or Sunny. I didn't notice if any of the other leaders are here. They've got that little wrench in front of the live stream. That means that they're one of the leadership team members. They're very knowledgeable, they're very kind, and they're always willing to help if they can. They don't know, they'll reach out to me, and then we can circle back and get the answer to you. Because this is a classroom. We're all about learning from each other and teaching each other. We all share the role of being a teacher and always a student. So there you go. Let's see here. So quick good morning to Paula and to Susie. Good morning to Kathy King. Who else? Good morning to our friend Osman, who I believe is in the beautiful country of Turkey. And I think good morning to Sunny, of course. Good morning to Sunny. So I think I've greeted everybody. Let's look at these before pictures. If you don't do Facebook or you somehow missed them, it'll give you an appreciation for where the machine started. The first shot, really, I want you to notice, because it highlights the fact that a machine from the outside can look pretty doggone good. And yet, as you dig into that machine, all of a sudden you discover the ugly secrets hidden underneath the shell of that machine. stuff like this. Now that's wiring that you do not want to have on your vintage sewing machine. That particular wiring was supplying the power to the machine. So the most essential supply, taking the highest amount of voltage and direct power, was just in an awful dangerous state. Here we're starting to focus on the motor and starting to see, what are we going to find inside of here? And this motor on this machine, it's also true of the 332 and 338 as well, and a couple of the 130 models by PFAFF. It's powered by a 1.3 amp motor. So comparatively, if you look at a motor like this, a 1.3 amp motor, and you compare it to some of the big Singer machines that most of us know, the Singer, anything from the 201-2 to the 1591, they're only going to have about a 0.5 to a 0.6 amp motor. So this motor on this PFAFF machine, sent to the workshop by Paula Dorn. I haven't even mentioned the owner yet. Sent to the workshop by Paula Dorn from South Carolina. Has, as my friends in Sweden and Norway and a number of other places in the world, it has an engine. They don't call them motors in a lot of parts of the world. They call them engines, which I think is kind of cool. So this particular PFAFF 230 has an engine almost 2 times, actually, correction, more than 2 times the size of some of the biggest Singer machines that you see on this channel quite often. The 201-2, the Rolls-Royce of Singers, and the 1591, and certainly a lot of the other Singer models as well. So PFAFF is serious about wanting to power their machines and give that owner a really cool experience. All right, let me stop blah blah blahing. If you look closely here, you'll see that there's a break, and I've got the cord coming off of the engine or the motor pulled up a little bit. So this would have been just below the metal casing of the motor. These are 2 bare electrical leads that would be grounding out on this metal case. And if the owner happened to reach back there for whatever reason, they would have gotten a nasty shock off of this broken wire that supplies the motor. Trying to see what that is. I take so many pictures during the process, I sometimes lose track of what I took a picture of. It's just showing more of the internals. I think some of the broken insulation on the wiring as well. Here's another example of how you don't want your vintage sewing machine to be wired. That's actually the main junction point. And we're going to be talking about this main junction point quite a bit during this live stream today to set you straight on how do you wire a machine when it's made in Germany. It's going to be different if you've helped to wire a Singer sewing machine before. Then you might be familiar with what I refer to as the zones. This would be a typical wiring junction point for a Singer sewing machine. And you can see you've got zone 1, 2, and 3. Typically, I would say almost without exception, on Singer sewing machines, the junctions that are going to be the hot and the neutral, which is really essential to know if you're doing wiring, is usually going to be zone 1 and zone 3. So that's going to be your hot zones right there, zones 1 and 3 on the majority of Singer sewing machines. And so if you turn it the other way, as it's pointing out to you, you're basically going to be going from right to left, almost like you're in Israel. You're going to be going backwards. So this would be zone 1, 2, and 3. Normally, we're used to going from left to right. When you're looking from the outside, you go from right to left. So this again is zone 1, 2, and 3. So on this Singer sewing machine, when you plug your little cord into there, you're going to notice if you look at your cord carefully and you look, say on the inside of here, inside of there, you're going to notice that in the center, there's no copper contact on the inside hole in the center. That's because it serves as a relay where you're going to be completing the circuit for the motor and the foot controller. In other words, when you wire something like this on a Singer sewing machine, let me turn it the other way. When you wire something like this on a Singer sewing machine, you're going to have to wire it so that on the hot zones out here on 1 and 3, you're going to be putting the 2 leads for your light so that it gets continuous power out here, 1 and 3. When you're wiring the motor and the foot controller to a junction like this, you've got to divide them. So, for example, since we know we've got a hot and neutral on the outside, we're going to be dividing the motor and the foot controller between these 3 points. So you can wire it differently depending on your setup. You might put the motor lead on zone 1 and 2, and then you'll put the foot controller on zone 2 and 3. So they'll be sharing space with the light that's on the outside here. Let me say that again, because I know I'm kind of explaining something a little bit in Greek or Hebrew or something like that. So again, on a Singer sewing machine, your hot zones for wiring a light will be 1 and 3. And then you divide your leads for your motor and for your foot controller between the zones 1 and 3. For example, you could put the motor on 1 and 2, and then you would put the foot controller on 2 and 3. You always overlay them. That way, when you push on the foot controller, you're going to complete the circuit. You never ever want to put a motor on a Singer sewing machine on zones 1 and 3, because when you fire it up, in other words, when you plug that power cord in, the motor will just run continuously, because this on the outside is a continuous hot zone. These are intermittent hot zones when you're dividing the wiring for that motor and for that foot controller. The same is true. You never want to make the mistake of wiring the foot controller. In other words, you're going to have 2 little wire leads for the foot controller that you'll need to connect to this junction on a Singer sewing machine. If you make the mistake of putting your foot controller on zones 1 and 3, when you depress that foot controller, it's going to be the equivalent of sticking a screwdriver into an electrical outlet. You'll not only get a big poof and very likely destroy your foot controller, but you're also going to get a real big scare. And certainly electricity can backflux as well, which means it could cause damage to your motor that's connected with your foot controller. So just keep that in mind. How do you determine all this? The easiest way to determine how a machine is wired, whether it's a Singer one like this or a PFAFF machine like this, is you've got different power cord choices. And let me show you another 230, by the way, while I'm kind of rambling on here. Back by Herr Obermeister, we have another version of the 230 back here. And when I posted this on Facebook, there was one person that said, I didn't know black PFAFF seen this type of 230 here, which is a little bit of a later version. And they're very much identical in how they function. The big difference with this one that Herr Obermeister is by is you'll notice on this side, they've got a special guard. I think I can stretch my camera that far, hopefully. They've got a special guard here that's going to cover that belt on the side of the machine. I'm not sure if you can see that or not. Let me rotate it a little bit more. That special guard right there. And there's also going to be an added pulley that they put on here as well to give that belt a little bit more of an even ride over the motor. So they made that innovation on this particular PFAFF 230. On the machine out of South Carolina that belongs to Paula Dorn, you can see it's an open type setup where that belt is on the side of the motor pulley, and then it comes up to the balance wheel there. So over time, they made certain subtle adjustments to the machines, but all in all, the machine stayed from a functional standpoint pretty much the same. If you're used to working on this type of PFAFF, you'll be able to work on this PFAFF. The same thing is true vice versa. So they're generally, I think that they're generally fairly easy machines to operate, but that's because I've worked with them a lot. Other folks, I noticed from different posts online and that they struggle a little bit more with kind of figuring them out. So we'll look at that a little bit today as well. But okay, back to the power cord. Let me talk about that first before I get even more distracted than I am usually. So this is a typical power cord that you might see on a Singer sewing machine. So if I plug this power cord in, gotta find an outlet to plug it into. If I plug a power cord like this in, which I just did, if I have a general voltage detector like this, I can turn this on. You just heard a little beep beep, and it's going to tell me if I have electricity coming to this plug. I plugged it in. Hopefully I have electricity. Well, I've got it in kind of a wonky plug. Let me try a different plug. Some of my plugs have a little bit of a weirdness to them. Let's see if I got it this time. Yeah, that one's faulty. Let me pick a different one. This one should be fine, I think. Unless my battery on my voltage detector is going, that could be too. It must be my voltage detector is getting a little bit faulty. So it might be a little bit hard to see in this lighting, but the way I determine the hot zones on this particular plug, power supply plug for a Singer machine, is I can put this voltage detector, it's a little bit older style one, into these points right here. If you look closely at the light on top, we're not getting any light right now. Not getting any light. Now, if I try, so I'm in zones, what would that be? I guess I'm in zones 2 and 3. Now, if I go in 1 and 3, our light all of a sudden, I'll kind of make it come on and off a couple times. You see that? All of a sudden, our light comes on to tell us that we are getting voltage. And that's the easiest way to determine what your hot zones are when you're testing a particular plug and you're working with a different machine that was made somewhere else in the world. So we know on this plug for the Singer machine, as I had said earlier, our hot zones are going to be zones 1 and 3. So we know when we wire this particular plug, this type of plug here, and we plug it in, and I'm protected on the back because these screw caps are on. But as I plug it in, isn't it always fun to try to do things on camera versus otherwise? So right now I have it plugged in. And so we know that our main power is going to be on zones 1 and 3. This is where we're going to wire our light. We know our intermittent power is going to be on zones 3 and 2, and then also 2 and 1 separated. So we'll wire our motor here on 3 and 2. We'll wire our foot controller on 2 and 1. And then when you depress that foot controller, it'll complete the circuit, and then all of a sudden, your machine will start running properly. Yeah. So that's just a little bit of, I guess, insider understanding as to the zones on a Singer. But let's talk about a PFAFF now, which is going to be different. On a PFAFF power supply, and there's different setups for them as well. Imagine if you're, for example, working with this machine back here. This machine already has a particular setup that's going to incorporate the foot controller. This is called a 2-lead wiring harness. So you're able to connect your foot controller to the same harness, plug this single plug in right here, and then you're able to operate the machine without any fancy wiring scheme. But it's different when you're dealing with this earlier version of the 230 over here, because most often you're going to have separate wiring coming off the back from the motor. And the motor is going to have to be wired into this junction right here. And the wiring on this machine, as far as how the motor is wired into that junction point that you plug this into, is going to be different. So I could use a setup, let me just show you again. I could use a setup like this on Paula Dorn's machine, but I would have to change the configuration of how I have the motor set up on here right now. Right now, I've got a power lead going in right there. And then I've got the foot controller and the motor wired into this junction, kind of like I showed you we would do on this Singer setup, kind of dividing them between the zones. So right now I can't plug this into this machine over here because the wiring schematic is set up differently, because we don't have this harness where they've already pre-wired it for us. We wire this manually. And by that, the zones are going to be changed a little bit. The hot zones will remain the same, but the way we wire the machine itself is going to be different. And I've kind of broken it out here right now just to give you a kind of a clear understanding of how we would change it. So if it's pre-wired like this, and you've already got the foot controller wired into the harness, and all you do is plug in the power cord right here. We plug in that plug, and then we plug this into the side of the machine, like on this later version of the PFAFF 230 back here. That's all we have to worry about. Everything's going to be good to go. But when we have a bypass setup like this, where Paula Dorn, this is actually another customer's for this machine. Paula Dorn did not even send a foot controller with her machine. So when I set this up to be wired, I had to manually wire this junction point, kind of like I described the Singer one, taking into account that the hot zones are going to be different on this PFAFF model. And I'll show you what I mean by that real quick. So where on the Singer model, when we were testing it, we got a response on the outside zones 1 and 3. On the PFAFF model, it's going to be different. The Germans like to be unique in their wiring scheme. So where we try to do it over here, and we try to get a response on zones 1 and 3, we get nothing, because the hot and the neutral zone are different on the schematics of how the Germans wire their machines. So where are the hot zones on this? Are they going to be 1 and 2? Are they going to be 2 and 3? Let's try 2 and 3, see if that works. All of a sudden we get a response, don't we? So we know on the wiring plug-in for the PFAFF machines, all of a sudden our hot and neutral zone have moved from 1 and 3, like you'll see on the Singer machines, over to 2 and 3 on the PFAFF machine, because we've got that light right now indicating that we have power. And you might be saying, okay, thanks for all the blah, 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 Scott, but what's the big deal? What's the big deal when it comes to these hot and neutral zones you're talking about? The PFAFF is going to be 2 and 3. The Singer is going to be 1 and 3. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is, if you don't know that the hot and neutral zones on the PFAFF are different, then you're going to wire up, and this is obviously a Singer one, but the PFAFF one is going to be very, very close to this. You're going to wire up the PFAFF one with the assumption of where the hot zones are, like a Singer, and you're going to either damage your motor or you're going to blow up your foot controller. So you have to understand that when you're dealing with machines that come from different parts of the world, they might elect to have the wiring scheme differently than another manufacturer in another part of the world. Singer elected to make their hot and neutral zones 1 and 3, like that. PFAFF elected to make their hot zones 2 and 3 instead. And so when we wire a setup like this, whereas on a Singer, you can see right now I've got electricity. Whereas on a Singer, we would, as I said, we would wire the light on zones 1 and 3. It's going to be different with the PFAFF. We're going to have to wire the light, and I'm just going to make sure I'm plugging in correctly. Yep. We're going to have to wire the light on zones 2 and 3 instead of on 1 and 3. If you don't do that, your light's not going to work. And if you make the mistake of connecting your foot controller to zones 2 and 3, one lead here, one lead there, kind of like I talked about, you could divide them on the back of this Singer plug-in. When you push that foot controller again, it's going to be like sticking a screwdriver into a light socket, and you're going to get a loud poof. And you're going to probably not only destroy your foot controller, but you also might damage your motor because it's connected directly to that foot controller. So that's why it's essential you understand that the wiring is different. Singer is one way, PFAFF is another way. Does that make sense? I'm going to stop blah blahing for a second and look at the chat and just see if I've totally confused you or if what I've described or tried to describe makes sense. You know, it's really essential that you know this as a sewist, because I know most sewists that I talk to are also tinkerers. They like to do what they can, what they feel comfortable doing on their sewing machines, and sometimes that requires a little bit of rewiring. So it's essential you understand those differences so that you can do it safely. All right, I'm going to look at the chat real quick, see if I've confused everybody. Oh, okay. Well, let me answer a question that you all are having a discussion about real quick right now. Are they aluminum or are they metal? Are they aluminum or metal? That's easy to determine. Now, here's the tricky part. So we got a positive response there. But the correct answer is both. So the middle part of the casing here is going to be steel, just like the bed. This is also steel as well. But the cover that's off is not going to be steel. It's going to be made from most likely aluminum, but definitely a metal that is not going to get a magnetic response like here. See, it won't stick there. It won't stick on the faceplate area either. So that's also going to be a different type of metal. So the main part of the arm and the pillar, the main part of the arm and the pillar are going to be steel. The top and the faceplate are going to be made out of most likely aluminum or a non-magnetic type alloy. Balance wheel is going to be metal, as is the clutch. And so as manufacturers look at machines, they decide where is the most strength needed. Obviously, you need a strong bed, a strong frame on the bottom with the pedestal feet. The arm part that supports most of the mechanics of the machine, including the main shaft, that's got to be very, very strong and sturdy as well. So they make that out of steel. Faceplate, not so much so, and the cover, not so much so as well. And most of you know you just give this a jiggle, and it comes off straight away, so you can service the machine more easily. So that was really I love when you have these discussions. It's kind of a discovery process, isn't it? As we decide if I can get this lid back on. There we go. It's kind of interesting to discover things through discussion, isn't it? And the same thing is true of this a little bit earlier version of the 230, this black one, steel bed, aluminum type face plate area, steel frame coming off of the arm and the pillar, and then again a I guess you'd call it a non-ferrous magnetic type material on top as well. Same thing, metal balance wheel, and steel clutch as well, steel metal. So yeah, good discussion, you guys. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Freedom X Force, isn't that fun? And hello to Ronald as well. Hello to Ronald. I'm not sure what Ronald means by you can wire it however you want it, but we'll let Ronald stand on that. But the thing I want you to understand is that the machines are different in how they set them up. And that's really the choice of manufacturer. In Germany, they set up those hot and neutral zones differently than they do on the Singer machines that were made primarily in the States at Elizabethport, New Jersey, and Anderson, South Carolina. And it is important that you understand that, because that's really what you're working with. If you order something like this online, this is going to be a dual type lead setup where you can connect this directly to the foot controller. This plugs into the machine, and it serves also as the power supply as well. You're going to have to know how that motor comes into the scheme of things on the particular PFAFF 230 that you're working with. Again, the motor is going to have its separate leads that connect to a junction similar to this. And you've got to understand that where that motor is going to connect on these leads is going to be different depending on what type of setup you're working with, whether it's a 2-lead like this, or whether it's a single lead like this that serves only as the power supply. And they really went to this point just to make it easier for the end user so that they wouldn't have to worry quite as much about the wiring setup. If you buy something like this, it's almost a turnkey where you open up your foot controller, you connect it, you plug this into your machine, you plug this into your power supply, and you're off and running. Very much like this setup right here that I showed you that belongs to another customer that has this this PFAFF 230 in the rear that I showed you before. So I know that people will sometimes disagree on what I say, but let me say that it will suffice to say that if you say it doesn't matter how you wire a machine, if you start from the very beginning, you're still going to be working with the setup that manufacturer has given you as far as the hardware that you're working with, the power cord, whether it's a dual or a single or whatever it is. And you're still going to have to take into account is where is that motor currently connected on this power junction for that particular PFAFF motor. Like I showed you on the setup, if you're dealing with a bypass like I have on this black one right now, your motor on that one is going to be connected to zones 2 and 3. Whereas if you deal with a pre-wired one like this, that's going to be a dual or a twin lead type wiring setup, similar to this one as well. Your motor all of a sudden is going to move from zones 1 and 3. It's going to move to zones 2 and 3. So it's going to be different. And you need to know that if you want your setup to work. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm not trying to call Donald to task or anything like that, but I do want to emphasize it really is important you understand because most people are not going to start with a machine that has no wiring in it and go from ground zero to a machine that they're going to wire. They're going to acquire a machine that's already going to be pre-wired to the greatest extent, and then you have to look at solutions to power that machine with a foot controller, and where does that motor connect on those zones? And depending on your setup, it's going to change for sure. It's going to change for sure. Okay, enough blah, blah, blahing. All right. Hopefully that's helpful in some way. Yeah, I think calling it a parenthetic point is kind of a fun way of describing it. But really, you you don't have to use something like this, but the manufacturer designed this so that it's that much easier generally to set up a machine to work. Now, Donald might have an electrical background. He might be a licensed electrician, and that's all well and good. I've had a number of customers that have electrical backgrounds working as electricians, and they have a different way of looking at the world, don't they? But for the average sewist, this is going to be your setup, similar to this, whether it's a FOF or a Singer. And all I'm trying to do is help you understand that the zone breakout on these is going to vary when you're looking at machines made in the US versus German machines. And also, as you're dealing with the German machines, whether you elect to have, like on this machine, a separate power cord, it's a single lead that only power. And then we've wired the foot controller and the motor into this junction point. Uh, it's important you understand where those leads need to be put so you have the right outcome. Yeah, no one wants to blow up a foot controller, but it can happen. No one wants to plug it in and all of a sudden have the motor start running continuously because they put the motor on the hot and the neutral leads instead of putting it on an intermittent lead where that circuit can be completed. So just understand this is really just meant to give you a greater depth of understanding and appreciation for how your machine works and how it differs depending on the setup that you have, single versus dual lead. Okay. All right, that's enough of that. That's enough of that. So again, our setup on this particular FOF machine today, our setup is we're going to be trying to use some of these Schmetz embroidery needles, which are a little bit smaller than what we typically use. This is going to be a 7511. We normally use a 9014. And again, it's designed for embroidery because we're going to be doing some embroidery type stitches on this model 230 today. And also I'll probably cut some material as well. We'll sew maybe a little bit of elk hide. We'll sew a little bit of saddle grade leather, but I'm not going to go extensively into this today because really I wanted to cover more so the electrical setup of the machine so that you could appreciate that a little bit more. Yeah, Susie makes a good point, doesn't she? Because again, all of us as we look at these situations, we have a different depth of understanding. We all come to the equation with a little bit different tools in our toolbox, different experience, different life experiences, different, maybe even professional training. And when we're looking at something like this, understanding that a little bit better, oh, there's different hot zones. I didn't know that. It almost sounds like we're going to have chicken wings or something like that. But understanding the hot zones is helpful as you're moving and migrating between different machines. It can also help you troubleshoot issues as well, can't it? If you all of a sudden push on the foot controller and you think you have it wired correctly, but you're not getting a response from the motor, then you can start saying, well, maybe I've got an issue with my motor, or maybe I have an issue with my motor brushes, because motor brushes can also play into the equation as well, can't they? Because they run over that commutator as that electrical force is coming through the stators and powering into the motor and driving that electrical field. There's all kinds of things that can get in the way of us having success, isn't there? So the more we understand, the more and better equipped we are to try to embrace our vintage sewing machines and overcome obstacles. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, maybe it does. Okay. So what I have to do is I have to finish threading this 230. I change that needle out, and then we'll look at the threading on this machine as well. I think it's fairly simple, but we'll just take a look at the threading and just make sure that we're comfortable with the threading of this 230 also. Oh, I didn't even pull the bobbin thread up that yet. Look at that. I pulled the bobbin out as well. Yeah, we'll pull that thread up, and well, actually, I've been blah, blah, blahing now for almost 45 minutes because I really wanted to cover that electrical stuff as best as I can just to help you to understand that better. And we haven't even used the machine yet. Too many crickets. And this machine again, oh, and I didn't even finish my little blah, blah, blahing about the motor either, did I? It's one of those scattered Saturdays, I think. So I was starting to show this to you, and then I went way all over the place. You know, we talked about that junction in the hot zones. That's a dangerous hot zone, isn't it, when you have wiring like that? That again is the power cord on the PFAFF in the back, and I didn't even recognize the owner of the PFAFF 230 in the back. We're kind of using his machine as an example, and I didn't even mention him. This particular machine in the back, this one over here, this particular machine in the back came from Maxwell Lafon. Maxwell Lafon. Isn't that a cool name? I think it is. Maxwell Lafon, and he lives in Denver, Colorado. So I get calls all the time from people around the country, around the world, and they go, well, I live all the way down in Illinois. I don't think I could ship my machine all the way to you in Wisconsin. And then when I start to tell them where machines come from Denver, Colorado, from London, England, from Australia, from all around the world, they go, I guess Illinois isn't that far, is it? But Maxwell sent this in because he's got a bunch of concerns about it. And his main concern really centers on power. So as we were talking and you were patiently listening to me, blah, blah, blahing about the electrical zones and wiring machines and how they differ and all that stuff. That's one of the areas that I'm going to be focusing heavily on as I look at Maxwell's little bit later version of the PFAFF 230, because he's got some major power issues. He goes, I've watched your videos. I know what a 230 can do. I've seen what your 230s can do. I've seen what your 332s can do. And mine is nowhere close to that. So that'll really become an opportunity to understand electricity, won't it, on Maxwell's machine as I start to dig into this and identify why is he having so many power issues with this particular machine. Hopefully it's not because of stuff like this. It shouldn't be, because his is wired, his harness supplies the power, whereas on this one that belongs to Paula Dorn, on Paula Dorn's, you have to have two separate plugins on this particular PFAFF, the way it's set up, the way it was built in Western Germany. You've got to have this type of power cord plugged in the back to supply the light. And then you have to have that other power cord like this plugged in the side that's going to power the motor and also act as a relay, depending on how it's wired up, act as a relay for the foot controller as well. So understanding electronics and electricity really can be helpful even when you're a sewist, right? Yeah. So that's kind of the stuff we had going on. We're starting to get into the motor a little bit more, starting to pop that motor open. And I'll tell you something about this particular motor that really proved to be a bit of a challenge. Sometimes people will, with good intentions, use different devices or different methods to try to make sure is going to be stable and consistent. What do I mean by that? Some people will take something like Loctite, similar to this. they'll take something like this, because once they've torn that motor apart, they're thinking no one else is ever going to open this motor again. It vibrates a lot when it's operating, and those bolts that hold the casings together could come loose. So I'm going to use something like a Loctite, but most often they don't use the blue stuff. They use the red stuff. And if you don't know anything about Loctite, it's something that you can put on the threads of, say, a bolt on a sewing machine, or on really anything, on a car for that matter. And the red stuff is permanent. You have to heat up that surface to a ridiculous temperature, almost like 1,000 degrees, 1,200 degrees, in order to break that red stuff free. The blue stuff is kind of a medium strength, and it's designed to hold that bolt stable when there's a lot of vibration. So the person that had worked on this motor prior to me elected to use the red stuff. So I had a heck of a time getting this motor open. So if you decide you want to safeguard it, and you're saying, I don't want those bolts to loosen up with that motor running and vibrating, use this blue medium strength stuff. You have to heat it up to about 600 degrees to get it loose, but it's a lot easier when that motor goes to be serviced again than the red stuff. So just understand those differences in the thread lock. So we're starting to get into this motor. You have to take off the output pulley. I'll kind of scroll through here a little bit faster. Now we've got the casing open finally. We can start to examine that motor and see what we see. And then I put a fun little picture in there showing basically sticks of dynamite getting ready to blow up, because that's kind of what this motor was in the condition of. If you look at this motor right here, these are the stack lamentations. This is the commutator right here. And those stack lamentations are not supposed to be brown like that. Why do you think they're brown like that? What do you guys think? Yeah, Freedom Hope is spot on. See, what he's saying is he's got to use probably a torch, a butane torch or something that's going to hit probably close to 2,000 degrees when he's using that red thread lock applications. And that makes sense on big. You definitely don't want a bolt to come loose on, on a thrasher or something like that, where you're dealing with an equipment that could be very dangerous and hurt somebody. So Freedom X-Force is, Susie is saying burnt. Paula is saying old oil. All of you are correct. All of you are correct. Because what this is it started as oil, where someone had made the mistake of oiling the motor. I think most of us know you never put oil into a motor on a sewing machine like this. There's grease on the end ports where the output pulleys are that are going to generate the most amount of friction, and you lubricate that with an appropriate type of grease. That's also rust on there as well. That means that this motor was in a very, very wet environment, and what started as kind of a general crud and buildup then transformed into rust. And this motor, and powering through the stators, and then coming into the stack lamentations, coming down there, and eventually making its way down to the commutator, that's all electrically charged. And when you send electricity through a field like this, it's already crudded up and has moisture in it. It creates a huge scale of that had to be mitigated. You'll see as I scroll through here, as you start to see the normal color of those stack lamentations starting to come back into view. There's even a closer shot. You can see the rust actually built into that motor. Now, rust is not the friend of a motor or any part of our vintage sewing machine. So you can imagine what that was doing to that motor. Plus, it was retarding the heat inside of those stack lamentations. So it was causing that motor, even with a little bit of use, to heat and to get so hot you couldn't even touch the casing on the back of the motor. They were just looking a little bit more into the motor casing itself. Just a lot of issues going on with this motor. Like I said, it's probably one of the worst that I've ever seen. I talk about sewing machine motors acting like what? What do they act like? It's a household appliance that pretty much everyone has in their house. Motors act like what? Someone. Motors act like a vacuum cleaner. When a motor is running, it's pulling air in, even if it doesn't have a fan necessarily built into it. This one does, but it pulls air into it and everything that's in that environment. So if you've got if you have pets, if you've got a smoker in the house, if you have outside environmental elements like construction nearby and you've got a window open and you're operating your sewing machine, all of that stuff from that outside environment is going to get sucked into that motor, almost like you've seen in some movies where a jet engine all of a sudden hit a group of birds and the birds will get sucked into the motor and then it just flames out the motor and all kinds of horrible things happen. You know, on a lower and smaller scale, that's what happens with sewing machine motors. Whatever's in that environment, it's going to pull them in. If your sewing room is near your kitchen and you're cooking some real greasy bacon, or you're cooking something else that's putting a lot of stuff into the air, even if you've got that little hood above your stove, inevitably the stuff will work its way around that and get into the other parts of the house. That stuff will get sucked into your motor as well. And as that field is electrified, it will actually fuse all of that stuff, environmental stuff, to the different components of your motor. And that's kind of what you're going to see me mitigating as I go through the motor, everything from household stuff to all the stuff that this motor has sucked in. And there you can see, looks like probably pet hair, possibly a cat or a dog, where that stuff will work its way into there as well. Kind of yucky, isn't it? All that is inside of this motor. And if you've never gone through and done a deep cleaning on your motor might look like this on the inside as well. More stuff. And again, this is all having an impact on the performance of the motor and how efficient it can run. And we're just looking at the two major parts of the motor. We've taken out the main core of the motor, and we're going to start mitigating some of the issues now. Also have to deal with some wiring issues as well. There's some bare wires on the inside. Bare wires. And again, this is a metal cased motor. If you have bare wires touching a metal cased motor, you are in a world of hurt if for some reason you happen to reach over the top of the machine and make contact with that motor. And because that motor is mounted to the right side of the pillar, which is also metal, that electrical shock theoretically could by a bare wire like this all the way through the machine. So no matter what part of the metal casing you touch on that motor, you could receive a very nasty shock. And I've gotten calls from people about that happening to them with different types of machines that they have. Oh, I like that, Ronald. That's a good way of saying it. Yeah, line loss. Yeah, look at that. Look at that. So now we're just starting to dig these fairly quick. Some more bare wires as well. And the only thing that really protects us and protects our equipment from the electrical current running through these wires is the insulation. And that's a problem we run into with a lot of the PFAFF machines, is that insulation will become, whoops, that was weird. That insulation will become dried out and brittle, and then eventually will, my phone just went totally crazy. That insulation will crumble off, and you've got electricity that is either going to be grounding out on the metal contacts of the machine, or it's just going to be leaking out. I describe electricity all the time as like water. Electricity is very much like water. Here, I'm back again. Not sure what happened there. That was weird. I got to scroll back through again now. Yeah, I think that's about where we are right there. So insulation is essential when it comes to keeping our sewing machines safe and also optimizing them. And that's part of the reason my approach when I rewire something like this. I had one person on Facebook that asked a very good question. They said, I'm just curious, why don't you simply solder your wire together? Why don't you just solder your wires together instead of using a pigtail or using an insulated wiring nut? It's for the very same reason that I'm talking about how essential insulation is with wiring. It's going to provide a better barrier. It's going to be more secure, and it's going to provide more protection from electricity leaking out. Here you can see already the color difference between the left and the right, and the center part that I've already dealt with that rust and crud that had built up on those stack lamentations. Hopefully you can see that. Yeah, sort of can. So again, I say it all the time, what you can't see can hurt you. This motor was a ticking time bomb, and I'm so glad that Paula sent it into the workshop. Because if you went to, just so you guys understand this, if you went to a sew and back, or you went to a mom and pop type sewing repair shop anywhere in the world, I can say with 99.9.99999% certainty that they are never, ever going to tear apart a motor like this. They're never going to do a deep cleaning on a motor like this. And so when you get your machine back, if it has a motor like this, that's a ticking time bomb, you're going to get a ticking time bomb back. As long as when they push on that foot controller, the motor fires up and they can do a quick little stitch line of stitches, they're going to be content. They're going to spend 45 minutes on your machine, and what you come in with is going to be exactly what you go out with. You're going to come in with this, you're going to go out with that. They're not going to take time to go into your machine at this surgical level and ensure that it's safe to operate and that it's going to be operating at the top of its game. So I always like to emphasize that 45 minutes at most sew and backs, and they don't apologize for that. That's what they say with their overhead and everything else. When I go through a machine like Paula Dorn's, and when I eventually go through Maxwell's back here, this one, you're talking about close to 14 hours. 14 hours versus 45 minutes. It's a big difference. More of that rust and crud coming off of there. Look at the difference here. You can really see that contrast incredibly well. This is the way it's supposed to be. This is the way it was up there. I'm going to shut that light off above just for a second. It's kind of hard to see a little bit. Yeah, I think that's a little bit better, maybe. Now look at that there. That's exactly what we want to be seeing. When we crack open a motor and we start to examine that motor, that's the way those lamentations should look. They're to the spin up of that motor as those stators are charged with electricity. If they're that clean, they're going to be driving that motor at the peak of its performance. Now we're focusing on the commutator a little bit. Commutator is where those motor brushes are going to be running over. It's really, really essential to the operation of the motor. And we're going to be dealing with that as well. Dealing with the commutator, the stack lamentations, inspecting the stators. There's our commutator the way it should look. And inevitably, as you're operating it, I say this all the time, those carbon brushes are going to be running over this surface, and this is electrified. It's going to require regular maintenance because that carbon inevitably will leave deposits on here and will start to hinder that motor. So the cleaner you keep your motor, the better your motor is going to perform and the cooler it's going to operate. Just more activity on the workbench as I'm dealing with this motor issue. Now here's a shot right here where you can see I've added new wiring coming in. I typically will use 16 gauge wiring. 16 gauge wiring, if you don't know, will actually support up to 10 amps. So it's a lot more, it gives a lot more voltage tolerance than this motor that's 1.3 amps will ever need. But it's like anything, when you're operating with a larger gateway, it's going to allow this motor to operate more fully and to operate without any hindrance. And I do use a pigtail type connector versus soldering it, so that I have that insulation factor. And then you'll also see me adding a high heat and oil resistant epoxy that I will basically inject into that pigtail or into that wire nut to ensure that that connection is even better insulated and that it's absolutely permanent. It's never going to come loose. Soldering can degrade. Soldering can break down and become brittle, and you can all of a sudden have a failure. When you wire it like this and you add that extra insulation, it's going to be a permanent solution. It's going to be a lot safer. It's going to, again, ensure that that electricity isn't leaking out as that motor is running and you're losing power for that motor. And it's also going to make it safer to operate. You can see we have new wiring coming in. I chose to use a wire nut up here, and I used a pigtail down there just because of the length of the wire. There we're starting to fill with that oil and heat resistant epoxy to make sure that these connections are well insulated and they're also protected and secure. Just more activity. And I'll kind of show you a pre-shot of how that motor was operating. Look at that temperature on my my heat gun, my heat temperature gun thing. When you get a motor that with minimal operation is hitting temperatures of over 200 degrees, that's a ticking time bomb. And that was the condition of how this motor was operating for intervention and doing these repairs and deep cleaning and service. Now it runs incredibly cool and it has so much more power. Those are some of the inside lamentations. And those also have, you can see they have some rust and crud built on them as well. More servicing. These outer bands you can see right here, this band here, and these bands over here. These are the stators that I was referring to. They really are the initial gateway for that electric motor. As that motor is electrified, this is the first field that electricity is going to be moving through. The stators, the stack lamentations, and then eventually migrating down the shaft to go to that commutator and then engaging those motor brushes. So all of this of you that are service oriented and comfortable working with electronics, you really have a great opportunity to maximize your motors. Otherwise, send it to the workshop like Paula did, and I'll take care of it for you. What a difference. Look at the brightness of that clean, pristine lamentation material that's going to allow that electricity to flow through there without any hindrance whatsoever. Isn't that beautiful? So here I'm showing you a contrast. This is the original wiring on the bottom. This is the replacement wiring. Again, depending on the motor setup and the demand of the motor, I will go between 16 and 18 gauge wiring. Either one will be more than sufficient to support any of our sewing machines. Until we get into the light industrial commercial range, then we might even have to go a little bit lower than 16 gauge wiring, maybe 14 gauge. And that's the thing about gauge wiring. As you're looking at wiring like this, that was probably probably close to 18 to 20 gauge wiring on this original motor on the bottom. And you can see it's obviously not safe. It's not serviceable. It's all cracked and dried out. That would have supported probably close to about 2 amps, 2 amps, 2 to 3 amps safely. Whereas this upgrade here that I just did for this motor up here, 16 gauge wiring is going to support about 10 amps. So about 3 times the tolerance for voltage on the new wiring versus the old original wiring that would have been wired up with this motor in Western Germany. And again, it was sufficient. It was sufficient motor. The motor again is only 1.3 amps, but the larger the gateway for the electricity, the more efficient that motor is going to run. Just kind of looking into the motor there, doing more cleaning. There's our fan, which if you look, you can see that fan in the shot. It's just filthy. As that fan has been spinning inside of that motor, all the stuff from the environment outside has just been coming in and sticking to it. And then it works its way beyond the fan into the rest of the motor. There's the after. More cleaning on the commutator. I'll just kind of go through these a little bit more quickly. You can always look these up on Facebook as well. Also, be real careful if you decide to be ambitious and take your motor apart. Depending on which end of the motor, there can be anywhere from 3 to 5 spacer washers that are going to be, some of them are going to be plastic or resin, some of them are going to be metal. And it's very easy as you're taking something like this out of the motor to do those or to somehow lose track of it. When you go to put your motor back together, it's not going to spin free and true. It's going to be binding because those spacers are essential. There's some on this end by the output pulley, and there's some on the other end as well, closer to the commutator. So just keep that in mind. Really watch for little pieces if you're pulling a motor apart, and keep the correct order. In the correct order, on the inside track, you're usually going to have spacers. On the outside track, that's going to be buffered up against the outside casing of the motor. You're going to have metal because they have to have that strength and that resilience as they're spinning up at high revolutions. The resin ones would basically deform and melt. The metal ones will stand up against it. So get them in the correct order as well when you reassemble the motor. And there's a kind of a distinction I'm making right there. These are actually, they're dirty. I haven't cleaned them yet, but these are actually resin. These little spacers right here, these little washers. These are resin, that's metal. So these will go on the inside. This will go on the outside. That's going to be matching up with the outside casing of the motor where the spin up and the heat is going to be greatest. If you ever test the heat on a motor, the output pulley ends, left or right, are going to be the hottest point of the motor because there's so much friction spin up in there. There we go. A little bit cleaner. They'll have a little bit of a stain to them, but metal and resin. Much nicer. There's a beautiful commutator. Look at that. Beautiful. And you'll see me here with my little bottle. Before you reassemble the motor, it's so much easier. There's little ports on the end of the motor, but it's so much easier where those washers are going to be sitting on that shaft to put a little bit of, I don't recommend machine oil on the inside of the motor. I recommend kerosene. Put a single little drop of kerosene on both ends where that, I'll kind of zoom in on a little bit, both ends where that friction point is going to be the highest on the motor. There's some of our washers again, just to show you how many there can be. On this one side, there's 5. And I'm just showing you here with my little magnet, kind of like we did when we were examining the machines to see what parts of the machines are steel versus aluminum. You get a magnetic response when that washer is metal. And again, that's the one you want on the outside because it's going to be able to stand up to that friction and heat. And here again, when you're reassembling the motor, these posts right here that go from one casing to the other, you've got to make sure that those are calibrated correctly so that that casing allows the main shaft to turn the most freely. Generally, they're going to be set pretty well, but I always make adjustments so that when I go to turn this with my fingers, it turns just like silk, turns very, very nicely. Again, reducing the drag on that motor and increasing the efficiency. Here we've got a motor that's really starting to come back together. More cleaning to be done there. There we go. That's the way it's supposed to look. And if someone out in, this is going to be going to South Carolina, to Paula Dorn. If someone out in South Carolina ever opens up my motor, they're going to know right away that somebody that is really, really meticulous has gone through that motor. Just by looking at that inside of the motor, they're going to tell straight away. And I won't be nasty and put any thread lock on there either. I won't do that to them. And there we go. The motor's fully reassembled. She is such a happy girl now. Wait until you hear her operate. And here I'm just checking. Those of you that are fairly mechanically inclined, you probably have worked with calipers. Mine's an old-fashioned mechanical caliper, but it's a great way to verify motor brush size. You'll sometimes get motor brushes aftermarket, and there's, say, a 5x6. When you measure them, you find out it's actually a 5x7. And that can be resolved very easily by taking a grade amount of sandpaper and sanding them down or sending them back to the person that sold them to you. Make sure that they're going to fit in that sleeve, the motor that comes down to the commutator, that they're going to fit and they're going to be able to move freely up and down. And then you have to calibrate the spring on that carbon brush as well, so that there's enough tension pushing down so that that carbon brush, as it's consumed, will continue to ride evenly over that commutator and will feed, and you won't have any interruptions. If you've ever had a sewing machine where you'll push on the foot controller and it won't go, and then all of a sudden you'll give the balance wheel just a little bit of a turn, and then the motor kicks in, that typically is going to be a motor brush calibration issue. There's either not enough pressure being pushed down by the spring, or the brush is not able to move freely in that copper shaft and move up and down with the movement and the motion of the motor, almost like a shock absorber to some extent. So don't be afraid to pick up at your local hardware store, a simple mechanical caliper like mine, and just verify your motor brushes before you put them in. Motor brushes for machines like these 230s should be calibrated as far as size of the carbon stack right around 5x4, 5 millimeters by 4 millimeters. 5x4 millimeters. And here, after I've reassembled the motor, I'm just doing a quick bypass with alligator clips, and I'm just wanting to fire up the motor to make sure that it's spinning up nice and true, no drag, no resistance, and then it's running well. So I always do that as one of my final steps before attaching it back to the machine. There it is. That's the end. Thank you so much for your patience. I'm hoping that information is helpful to you. So we started with a very sick, a very dangerous 1.3 amp PFAFF motor. And now we have a motor that will just blow the socks off of Paula Dorn when she sits down to this machine. And again, I've wired this machine specifically because I know that she's adding a foot controller to it when it comes back to her. So all I have to do is disconnect my foot controller and the wiring will already be in place. So all she'll have to do is open up that new foot controller that she has, connect the two leads, and then off she goes. So hope that's helpful. All right. Thanks for your patience, everybody. All right. Sonny's cleaning gutters. All right. So let's at last goof around with this machine a little bit, shall we? I'll show you the threading as well. And when you insert when you insert the needle in this 230, you'll want to make sure the flat side is to the rear. The flat side will be to the rear. And then you're going to be threading the needle. Again, we have a size 7511 embroidery needle in here today. You're going to be threading it from front to back. The rest of the threading, I think, is fairly easy. We've got some basic dual duty Coates and Clark thread, nothing fancy on top. We come through this thread guide right here. And this little door opens, if you didn't know that. This little door opens because as you're choosing different embroidery stitches, you might have to change the setting on this control right here. And this is Control A, by the way. Control A. When you're looking at a stitch card and you're trying to say, okay, it says I should set a Control A on 2. What the heck is a Control A? Well, on these 230s, your Control A is going to be right here in the top. Control A. Same thing on this one. That's our Control A right here on Maxwell's a little bit later version 230. So we come through this little thread guide here. We come through this thread guide next. You see that right there. Come across here. And again, some of your PFAFF thread guides right here will have 2 holes. Some of them might have 3. And again, the more holes they put is going to allow you to create more pre-tension, more pre-upper tension before it ever gets to the upper tension unit itself. In other words, imagine that there were 3 holes here instead of 2. If I want maximum upper tension, let's say I'm going to be sewing a product or a material where it's notorious for that lock stitch not being defined. Maybe it's a high vinyl content. Who knows? You're going to be threading it through all 3 holes, and then the last hole on the far left, you're going to be down sweeping with that thread so you can come through those tension discs. So this is just pretty standard 2 holes, but you'll see some machines that will have 3. I might even have encountered a PFAFF machine one time. It might have been in light industrial that had 4 holes that gave you a huge range of presetting that upper tension before it even goes through the upper tension. And then again, when you're setting up your upper tension and you're threading through it, always make sure your presser foot lever is up in the back. Watch what happens to these discs when I push it up. See that? It releases the tension then so that thread can be pushed deep in between those tension discs, and you can make sure that you're getting a nice even upper tension. Whereas if you try to thread it, and most people know this, but if you try to thread it when that presser foot lever is down in the back, those discs have a lot of tension on them right now, and you might be able to get the thread in there, but it's not going to go all the way in. And then you're going to have issues with your lock stitch. Make sense? I think so. Yeah. And then when we come around the other side, right here, you make sure that thread goes through your check spring, your take-up spring right there. Then we're going to be going up to our take-up arm right there, threading it from right to left. We've got a thread guide right there. We've got another thread guide right there. And then finally, we have another thread guide that a lot of people will miss that is right here, just above the needle. You have to come in from the left side, draw the thread in there, and then it gets that thread nice and centered as it's going down to the eye of the needle. So you get a nice even feed and you don't have any issues with the thread hopefully breaking. If you do have thread breakage issues, it's usually going to be because your upper tension is turned up a little bit too high. So, all right, hopefully that's helpful. All right, let me get this in place. And the material that I thought I would sew off on to demonstrate some of these decorative style type stitches that are built into this machine. Again, you don't have to put a cam into these 230s. There's already going to be a cam stack right here that's going to have all of those stitches engineered into them, depending on the setting that you make. So I think that's quite nice too. You never have to add a cam to these machines, which is really cool. Okay, so what if I want to sew I'm going to be sewing some of these line style stitches. And I can use either side of the card, even though this card side is for single needle stitching, or basically just normal stitching, and this is for a dual needle or twin needle sewing. Even though they're different, I can use either side. I don't have to relegate myself to one side. So let's say just for kicks and giggles, I wanted to sew this particular stitch pattern right here on Paula Dorn's PFAFF 230. I can set my different points, even though this side is technically for twin needle sewing. I can still set it and sew it with a single needle. It's just going to give a slightly different look to that stitch pattern. So let's say we want to do this one. You can see our settings is Control A is going to be 1. Control B is going to be 3. Control C is going to be varying. It's going to be floating. In other words, it's going to be moving. I'll show that to you. And then finally, D is going to be set on 2. And that's going to be basically our stitch width. So let's actually do that. I might already have it set, but we'll fake like we didn't actually set it already. No, I don't have it set already. Good. So as we're looking at this stitch card, and again, if you don't have a stitch card like this, go to the beginning of this live stream, and you'll see that I posted a link that will take you to a basically a frame-by-frame shot I took of the stitch card like this. And it'll show you frame by frame in time lapse every setting for the PFAFF 230, 332, and 338. And then I also have a time lapse for the 130 as well. And I believe the 130-6 with the coffee grinder embroidery kit on the back. So you want to look underneath that playlist and you'll find those time lapse videos. And then you don't need a stitch card like this. But we're going to use the stitch card since we have it. And this is mine. I don't know if Paula Dorn has one of these or not, but she can always go to that video. So the first setting is A, and we have to make sure it's on 1. First setting is A. We have to make sure it's on 1. So we go up here, and we're going to be turning this. Let me move my other hand. Turning this, you can see the little red mark right there. That's what we're going to be setting our number to, our little red mark. So we have to get it to 1. I'm turning it basically clockwise. Now we're on 1. So I can close my little door now. So that again is Control A that's underneath this little hood, this little door. Now we need to set Control B. Control B is going to be on 3, as hopefully you can see in the shot. I'm actually going to set my camera down for a second. So Control B needs to be 3. This is Control B on this PFAFF 230. And it's already on 3, but let's pretend that it's not on 3. So I'm going to start turning it. And interestingly, on this one, you have to turn it counterclockwise. This one up here on top, Control A, we turn it clockwise. This one we turn counterclockwise. I'm on 5. Now I'm on 4. Finally, I'm back on 3 again. Oh, I've got that set a little bit low. I'm sorry. So again, I'm turning this counterclockwise. There's 2. There's 1. 0 is when we're going to be shutting it off. 5. 4. Finally, 3. And then the last setting we have to do according to the stitch card is we have to set Control D. Where the heck is Control D? Well, you can see they make it easy on the stitch card, and I show this on my video as well. Control D is going to be that center knob right there. This knob right here, which controls stitch width. And you have to set it on 2, which it's already on 2, but let's say it isn't. So now I'm going to set it on 2. So now, according to this, we've set everything we need to generate a stitch that's going to look similar to that. It'll look a little bit different because, again, twin needle versus single needle. But we'll give it a go and see how it turns out. Okay, all right. Let me move the camera over there so you can watch the machine operate. There we go. I think you'll still be able to see the knobs, but you'll be able to see it stitching as well. Okay. And again, I always say it, start with your take-up arm at the highest position. This is your take-up arm again right here. All right, give a listen to this machine. We'll give it a go and see what you think. And I hopefully have it plugged in. That'll be helpful, won't it? Yeah. And again, because of our setting, it tells us that Control C, which is actually our needle position right here, this control right here, you might see this moving during different stages of the stitching process. I think it's fascinating just to watch the mechanics of the machine doing its little dance as it is. And again, with this needle position, if you push it down and up, you'll be at a far left needle position. 2 is going to be center needle position. And then finally, if you push it in and push it all the way down, you're going to be in position 3, which is a far right needle position. Hopefully, yeah, you'll see. All right, let's give this a go, see what happens. Here we go. Yeah, moving, see? I think it's so cool. I like the coffee grinder too on the back of the 130-6, the embroidery kit, because there you've got all kinds of little levers and all kinds of doodads doing a fun dance as well. So you can see that's what we got. It's quite lovely, I think. It's quite a lovely stitch. Almost like a building block type stitch. Nice balance, beautiful balance on the lock stitch as well. Quite lovely. I'm glad that I chose this embroidery needle, the 7511, instead of my normal 9014, because it's going to give us a little bit better stitch definition when we're doing these ornamental decorative type stitches that this machine has the capacity to do. Yeah. Sometimes changing needles is okay, isn't it? Sometimes changing needles is okay. And I don't know if you can hear it, but that motor is just running silky smooth. I apologize. Let me show that to you. That's our stitch right there that we just did. Our lock stitch. Yeah. And if you're not familiar with this material, I call it a bubblegum material. You kind of see why. And I love using this stuff because, especially when you're doing decorative ornamental stitching, it's going to show how well this machine is managing this tricky material. Again, when you're dealing with a bubblegum material like this that has a high concentration of vinyl, there's every opportunity to have distorted stitching. And yet we kind of gave ourselves a little bit, we hedged our bet a little bit. We hedged our bet by using an embroidery needle that's going to be able to manage that a little bit more easily. But still, it's a very tricky high vinyl content material to be sewing a stitch that has this much needle movement. And there is no tri-motion. There is no tri-motion on this machine like some of the Husqvarna machines. Tri-motion, if you don't know what that is, that's where the feed dogs work with the needle swing to push the material forward and back very rapidly. Here we're dealing strictly with needle swing. And so the fact that we're generating a gorgeous page 34 stitch like this with a tricky material, you know, a baseline type thread, very impressed, very impressed. Let's do our next stitch, shall we? So we just did this one, the little building block one on the far left. Let's go to the next one. The next one is going to be this one right here. And we need settings of 2, 3, and 2. 2, 3, and 2. Let's see what we think of this one. So let's go to our Control A first, which has to be on 2. We only have to click it one time. There we go. Then our next setting is going to be Control B. which has to be on 3. We're already on 3, so that worked out nice. This is already on 3. Again, control A, B, C, D. There's a secret control I didn't talk to you about yet. If we look at our stitch card, it talks about A, B, C, D. It doesn't talk about control E. What, Scott? There's a control E? How many letters of the alphabet do we have on this silly machine? Well, we've got A, B, C, D, E. Yeah. And the reason that E is so essential, which is up here, is that when this is turned to 0, if you look on the right side, when this is turned all the way to 0, it shuts off the cam function of this machine. So I've had people contact me and they say, Scott, I watched your video. I watched the playlist with the stitch card. I've set control A, control B, control C, control D, but the machine isn't doing anything. I said, did you set control E to somewhere between 1 and 4? They said, no, it's on 0. The 0 would be all the way over by this little arrow. I said, that's why it's not working. And what's the deal with these numbers on control E? The more of the stitch pattern you want in that field of sewing, the higher the number you want to set this to. In other words, if you want more of those little building block thingies, like here we sewed this little stitch line and we got almost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, almost 6 of our patterns repeating going through this field of sew off. Almost 6. That's because I have it on 4, which is going to condense that pattern the most and give us the most output. If we move it all the way to 1, it's going to stretch this out. So instead of getting almost 6 of these, we would only get about probably 2 or 3, depending on our stitch length. So not only is it important to know to turn this on, because this is the on-off for the cam, even after we've set everything else on the machine, it also, depending on where you set it on here, will determine what that stitch pattern and the frequency of that stitch pattern looks like as it's going down that material. Does that make sense? If it does, do a little smiley face or a thumbs up or something like that, just so that I know that you know what that is. The other important thing knowing about control E is this is also when we're winding a bobbin. You can see right now we're going from here to here to here. If we're winding a bobbin, we're going to be going from here around this field to here, and then eventually over to here. So not only does E turn on and off our cam function, it's also essential as a thread tensioner when we're winding a bobbin also. Yeah, sort of, kind of, maybe. All right, so let's go back to our stitch pattern that we're going to try to sew here. So we already set control A on 2. Control B is already on 3. Is that moving? That is moving. That's kind of creepy. Go back, go back, go back. So 2, 3, and 2. 2, 3, and 2. I think we're pretty much set. 2, 3, and 2. Yeah. So now we're going to be making sure control D is on 2. And it is. It's already on 2. So let's sew this next pattern, see what we think. Yeah, let's sew this next pattern. And I'll kind of leave it like this, so you can watch it do its little dance and stuff. I think that's pretty good. That's pretty good, I think. All right, let's give this a go. So we're going to be sewing this next stitch pattern now. 2, 3, 2. Let's see what this looks like. Oh, I didn't talk about one other thing. Quick little thing. As we're looking at the front of this 230 model, this black portion right here is going to be our reverse. When we're wanting to sew forward, it's all the way to the right. When we're wanting to sew in reverse, we slide this to the left, this portion right here. This other control right here is going to be our stitch length. And you can see right now by that little red marker, my stitch length is way down there. I'm right around 0.5. And when you're sewing ornamental type stitching, you want to move your stitch length way down to right around 0.5 to get the best definition. So I forgot to mention that. Okay, there we go. All right, let's sew this next pattern and see what we think. Here we go. Ooh, this is really active now. Watch this. Watch this over here and watch that. It's kind of fun. And that clicking sound it's making is absolutely normal. There's nothing wrong with it. It's making that sound as part of its function. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting one too, isn't it? Let's take a look at this one. Let's take a look at this one next. So the second row right here is the next stitch pattern that we just generated. They have a slightly different look, quite lovely. I like those little points that it makes on there. And again, if we were sewing, let's say we were sewing a cotton material with a stiffener, this definition would be even better than it is now. And I think it's quite exceptional for sewing on bubblegum material, which has a super high vinyl content in it. And we're still getting some lovely, lovely stitch definition. Lovely stitch definition. Let's turn it over. Beautiful lock stitching as well, which means we've got a sweet balance right now. We've got a sweet balance between our upper tension and our bobbin case. I cover this in all the videos, but it's important that you know this. Whether you're an experienced sewer or whether you're a brand new sewist and you don't even have your first vintage sewing machine yet, it's really critical that you understand the way tension works. This unit right here, in conjunction with this thread guide where I've pre-threaded the thread through those two holes to create a little bit of pre-tension on the upper tension. These two are going to work collaboratively with our take-up spring to define that lock stitch. In other words, this unit here is going to be pulling up. It's going to be pulling up to define that lock stitch. The bobbin case down below in the raceway is going to be pulling down to define the top stitch. So they're always in a tug of war against each other. This unit up here is pulling up. That unit down there is pulling down. You've got to find that balance where they're pulling together so that you can get a beautifully defined stitch like we've seen here. Hopefully that makes sense. And I know my experienced folks that follow me and my leadership team, they already understand this concept very, very well. All right, let's do our next one. Let's do our next one. So we're going to do this kind of a Zorro style stitch. A Zorro style stitch. And it looks like our stitch settings are going to have to be 3, 3, 2. And then our control C, which is our needle position, is going to be moving to help generate that stitch pattern. So 3, 3, 2. So we got to go to control A again and make sure that we're set on 3. We're not. We're set on 2. So we got to give it a click and get it over to 3. Close our little door. Control A, Control A. Now we have to look at Control B. According to the stitch card, Control B needs to be on 3. And it already is. So we don't need to change this at all. And then finally, Control D, which is our stitch width right here, this black knob, should be on 2. It already is. So we're done. That was easy. Actually, I should do that. Hold on a second.
That was easy.
Yeah. So let's do this next stitch pattern, see what we think. Camera angle. I'm doing this angle instead of just focusing down here because I want you to be able to see the mechanics of that Control C doing its little dance. It's basically using needle swing and needle position to manipulate how that pattern is being generated. Kind of cool. All right, let's do this next one. I've got the weirdest little foot controller that I've got wired into this temporarily. It's kind of awkward. Here we go. All right, here we go. Oh, that's fun. Isn't that fun? And I could even go shorter on this to compress that even a little bit more. But there's our Zorro pattern. I'll just call it a Zorro pattern. You might have a different name for it, and that's okay. Oh yeah, I like this one. I probably, if I were sewing this quite often, I would make that stitch length, even though I have it at 0.5, I would make it even shorter to draw this together and make those a little bit more defined. But it's quite nice, especially sewing on this vinyl. Yeah. Our lock stitch. No difference. No difference. Even though this is a tricky bubblegum material, and it even has that little coating on the back. Beautiful, beautiful lock stitching. So our upper tension unit is doing a beautiful job working with the bobbin case, isn't it? I think they're friends right now. Based on what we're seeing, they've made a friendship. They're doing the tug of war still, but they're still buddies. They're still friends. Yeah. Very, very nice. All right, let's do the next one. Let's do the next one. And I'll look at the chat real quick. I might be missing something. You never know. Yeah, Kathy, isn't it? It takes off like a rocket. Oh, hey. I think that's is that Dr. T from Finland? Dr. T from Finland. His screen name ends with channel or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, some people do start with plastic machines, don't they, Dr. T? Unless they come to our channel here and they go, wow, I think I'll just start with a vintage one. That makes more sense. So now we're looking at this next one that we're considering doing here. I'm going to call it kind of a ribbon stitch pattern, but maybe you have a different name for it. You can see our settings are going to be 4, 3, 2. We're not doing much with that D, are we? We're staying on D quite often. But 4, 3, 2 is going to be this next kind of a ribbon style pattern, isn't it? Kind of fun. So let's set this one now, 4, 3, 2. So we go to Control A first. You can see we're on 3 right now, so we've got to move it to 4. One click, that was easy. Close that up. And now it's telling us for Control B, we've got to be on 3. We're already on 3. Control D. Here, let me move this up a little bit. There we go. So Control B, we're on 3. Control D, we're on 2. That's it. That's all we have to do for this stitch pattern. It's quite easy, isn't it? So you can tell it's not really cumbersome as long as you know what the settings are. It's not cumbersome at all to go through these stitches, whether you have a stitch card like this or whether you use the video on my channel that I told you is under the playlist and actually provided the link at the beginning of this live stream. So if you scroll all the way to the top of the live stream, even if you're watching this later, there's going to be live stream replay and you'll be able to look at the link that I posted that will take you directly to a time-lapse video that I did frame by frame of each of the stitch settings for this machine. And it also applies to the model 332 and the 338 as well. Yeah. All right. So let's sew this next one, see what we think. And I'm going to try to demonstrate as best as I can. Kathy had mentioned it launches kind of like a rocket. I'm going to take this a little bit slower just to show you, even though I don't have the best foot controller wired to this machine right now. Again, this machine came without a foot controller. And Paula Dorn back in South Carolina has the foot controller that she's going to connect to this machine. That's why I've already pre-wired it. So when she plugs her power cord in, all she has to do is take those two leads like this. All she has to do is take two leads like this and connect them to her foot controller, and then she'll be good to go and be able to enjoy sewing with this machine straight away. All right, let's do this next stitch pattern. Again, watch the little dance in the middle. Certainly watch the needle and listen to this machine. I'm going to try to really slow her way down so you can watch that you are able to harness the power on this machine as well. All right, here we go. Going real slow. Even slower. No, I was a little bit too slow there. Anyway, the point is, you don't have to race. You don't have to race. I kind of took it a little bit slower there. There's our I'm calling it kind of a ribbon pattern. I think that's really cool too. Let's take a look at that one. And again, there's no, all of you that are VSM fellow teachers and students already know this. But for those friends of ours that are brand new to sewing, don't know a bobbin from a balance wheel, there's nothing electronic in this machine from a standpoint of computer boards or anything like that that's generating the stitching. It's all being done mechanically. It's a full mechanical process. So you can see this is the one that we just did here. Quite lovely. And again, if I make a little bit of a modification to the stitch length, I'm going to be able to change the look of this stitch even more. But you think about it being a complete mechanical process, it really is quite amazing. And this technology goes all the way back to the 50s, even the latter 40s for the PFAFF Sewing Machine Company. As a matter of fact, if you remember the original PFAFF 130 that was introduced, someone look up for me, when was the PFAFF 130 introduced? Something like 1932, something ridiculous like that. The PFAFF 130, when it was first introduced by PFAFF, was the first zigzag sewing machine that they really had. And then they added that embroidery kit, that coffee grinder, to their Model 130. They added a second cleated belt to it and made it a Model 130-6. And then all of a sudden, that zigzag machine was able to do all kinds of cool stuff like this. Pretty amazing. There's our lock stitch again, nothing different. The two of them are working in concert together. They're friends, and they're getting a beautiful balance between the lock stitch on this very, very tricky bubblegum material that has a lot of vinyl in it, and also the top stitch as well. Quite lovely. Yeah, let's do the next one. And I'll look at the chat real quick, see if there's anything I need to respond to. Oh, Big Joker. That's a fun screen name. Big Joker, welcome, welcome. And I know the leadership team and other members of our family have already hopefully made you feel welcome, but I always love seeing new screen names pop up in the live chat. That means we have a new family member for the Cow Country family. And I hope you feel like you're welcome. And you're never going to be made like in some that you might see on Facebook and blogs and other places is the grand poobah, and they're always trying to prove how smart they are and how stupid other people are. You're never going to get that feeling in this classroom. We're fellow teachers, we learn from each other, and we're always students. We're always learning. I learn from all of you, you learn from me. We share knowledge, and then we go out across the world and we share it with others. That's what makes this classroom so powerful, so powerful. Oh, thank you, Susie. 1932. I don't remember if I said 32. I think I might have. So, Susie, thank you for looking that up. So, the original PFAFF 130, and I also have a stitch guard frame by frame on this channel for that machine as well. They introduced this zigzag machine in PFAFF in 1932. That's way, way back in the day, folks, way back in the day. If you didn't know it, in 1932, there was another critical model introduced by the Singer Sewing Machine Company in 1932 also. It was none other than the Singer 15-92, 15-91, I apologize. The 15-91 was introduced right around 1932, and then a few years later, 1935-ish, is when they introduced the 201-2. So many things in the year 1932, only to name a few. All right, let's look at this next stitch pattern. Let's look at this next stitch pattern. All right, a little ribbon thingy. Where's that? We did the ribbon thingy. We've done 4 so far, right? Yeah, we've done 4. So now we got this little thing. It's almost like the McDonald's symbol, isn't it? Does this look like the McDonald's symbol to anyone else? They've got it facing one way, and then the next stitch pattern we can sew has it facing the other way. Or maybe it looks like a bird, like a seagull. What does it look like to you? This next stitch pattern that we're going to sew. Either like the McDonald's symbol, or maybe like a seagull or like a bird. I remember we used to draw pictures as kids, and that's kind of how I made my bird. But maybe it looks like something totally different to you. Maybe if I turned it like that, maybe it looks like the ocean waves or something like that. Who knows? But at any rate, that's what we're going to sew next. And you can see our settings are going to be 5, 3, and 2. So the only thing we already know that B is on 3. We already know that D is on 2. The only thing we're going to have to change is A potentially, right? But we'll still look at those other control points as well, just to reinforce it if folks joined a little bit late. So control A we've got to have on 5, don't we? Right now we're on 4. So let's move that one click. Now it's on 5. That was easy. All right, we'll close our little door, and we'll just verify. Control B. There we go. Control B. And yes, there's some paint loss, but Paula didn't commission me to restore this machine aesthetically. I certainly cleaned it inside and out, but a little bit of touch of paint on there would cover up that little imperfection nicely. Although it's kind of a battle scar, isn't it, of the machine. So control B is on 3, control D is on 2, and that's exactly what we need for this next stitch pattern. The bird, the McDonald's symbol, whatever we want to call this thing, we're going to try to sew it right now. And then we'll sew the opposite of it kind of back to back, won't we? That'll be kind of fun. Yeah, I'm kind of turning it. There we go. All right, let's give this a go, see what we think. Bring that down. There we go. That way you can still see the little dance. So again, the next pattern we're doing, if you joined us just now, we're going to be doing what I'm calling kind of the McDonald's or the bird symbol, this one here. And we've set the machine up 5, 3, and 2. Let's see what we think of this one. And again, this machine will listen. You saw how bad off it was, particularly the motor. And now we're going to see if we can demonstrate how beautifully and how happy she is. Let's do this next one. Here we go. Well, I need to watch my time as well. I need to be considerate of all of you. We've been running, and I know that time passes quick when we're together because we cover so many interesting topics. You have so many great conversations with folks in the live chat. You share your knowledge back and forth with each other, which is exactly as it should be. But we've been running over 2 hours already. So where I would normally run us through a wide field of sew-offs, I'm not going to do that this time. We're going to go through the rest of these stitch patterns to demonstrate the embroidery, decorative, ornamental side of this machine. I might quickly cut a piece of saddle grade leather and or a piece of genuine elk hide. We'll demonstrate the strength side of this machine, and then we'll wrap this up. Because I know all of you are very busy. I'm so honored and grateful that you take time out on a busy Saturday for us to spend time together. And I want to be considerate of that. All right. So our next pattern now, I want to do our next pattern. And again, I'll kind of meter the power up and down just so you can see that you don't have to race with this machine. You can take it a little bit slower and then kind of watch the dance over here and the dance over here. All right, here we go. That was fun. I got a little bit of a gust there. Slow it down. Speed it up. That was fun. Kind of went up and down, up and down. Oh, yeah. See, I would go a little bit shorter, but that's beautiful, a beautiful McDonald's symbol, isn't it? Let's go ahead and stitch the opposite, the mirror image. Let's stitch the mirror image of this McDonald's symbol, and then we can look at both of them together. That'll be cool. Yeah, we'll do the opposite one now. There it is right there. I'll give you a quick little glimpse. Yeah, quite lovely, quite lovely. Let's do the other one now. Let's do the mirror image of this McDonald's bird symbol thingy. See what we think of that. So we got to make a change, don't we? We just did 532. Now I need would go 1 over to 632. So all we're going to do is just click our Control A, one click. The one we just did is 532. Now we're doing 632. The mirror image of the stitch pattern we just did. The mirror image. So we go up top to Control A and we click it. One click to 6. Close our little door. We just verify real quick. Yep. Control B is on 3. Control D is on 2. We don't do a thing with Control C because it's going to be moving while we're sewing to sew this mirror image that we just sewed prior to this. So let's see what we get. Take up arms all the way up. Beautiful. Check my angle. Down a little bit. There we go. And this is my new camera. I'm hoping that when I have music on, apparently it somehow corrupts the camera. The camera doesn't know what to do. But I'm hoping that the visual quality and the audio quality when I don't have music playing is improved. We've had a couple of struggles over the last live streams. This is the pro version of the Razer camera, whereas the other one I had was the more basic entry-level one. This is my original one that I was using. So hopefully you're able to hear me better, you're able to see things more clearly, and we're able to enjoy the live stream better together without battling technology. All right, let's give this a go. We're doing the mirror image of the last pattern we just did. So let's see what we think of this. Yeah, that was fun. She's such a smooth sailor, isn't she? She's such a smooth sailor. All right, let's look at these kind of back to back now a little bit. You got a pre-glimpse of the other one already. Now we'll just look at these back to back. It's kind of fun, and I'm guessing for many of you that do projects, you love using mirror image patterns where you sew one way and then you sew it the other way, and it gives such a beautiful finished look, doesn't it? And again, if we were sewing with a cotton and a stiffener, we could step up this definition even better. But it's quite nice, quite nice. Our lock stitch, no different. I'm actually seeing a little bit more poppiness on the lock stitch. So if we were going to be sewing this bubblegum material a lot with these stitch patterns, we might want to back off our upper tension a little bit and give a little bit more definition to that top stitch. Right now we're getting a very, very nice poppy lock stitch, but our poppiness on the top could be a little bit improved. And all of you that are regulars already know my Kanai principle. If one of the leaders or one of the regulars wants to type into the live chat, what is Kanai? C-A-N-I. What does that stand for? It's the principle of the workshop. It's my core principle. It's the way I operate my restorative business, and it's really my my battle cry. It's really my battle cry. Does anyone remember what Kanai stands for? C-A-N-I. Yeah, that's lovely. Let's do another one. Let's do another one. All right, what's the next one? Oh, this is a little bit more intricate. This will be fun. This is the one we're going to do next. I'm not sure what you'd call this. It almost looks like a bat. Kind of like a bat, doesn't it? 732. 732. Yeah, let's do this one now. 732. So we already know the only thing we're going to have to change is Control A. You got to go up to Control A again. We're going to click it just one time to 7. That's it. That's all we had to do. Close our little door. Oh, and verify. Verify. Kind of like Ronald Reagan. Trust but verify. So our Control B is on 3, just as it should be. Our Control D is on 2. We're not doing anything with Control C because that's going to be moving. Should be good to go. Let's do the next one. There we go. I think that's a pretty good angle. All right, we'll do our next one. And again, I don't know what you'd call this stitch pattern. It almost looks a little bit like a bat, but maybe not. Maybe not. Yeah, Susie is exactly right. Constant and never-ending improvement. And Sunny is correct as well. Constant and never-ending improvement. So that means that tomorrow we're going to be better than we were today. Next week, my restorative methods, my servicing regimen for the machines, my technical approach to optimizing them and calibrating them and timing them perfectly, it's going to get better and better and better and better and better and better and better. That's constant and never-ending improvement. Kanai. Yeah. All right, let's sew a bat. No offense to people that love bats. We're going to try to sew a bat pattern now. All right, let's give this a go. See what we think. Oh, that's fun, isn't it? Look at that one. Look at that one. That does look like a bat. Sort of, kind of. take a look at this one next. I think I'm just going to do one more after this. So this is the bat style pattern that I just talked about. It's going to be on your far right, once I hold it still. And you can see again, I was talking about that Control E on top of the machine, the little thing where you can set how frequently the pattern appears. Because we have it on 4 right now, the maximum, we're going to get the most number of pattern repeats, which I kind of like. I like the frequency of it. If we were to reduce that number, then we would have much fewer than we do now. And again, if you're joining us late, this is a bubblegum material. It's a vinyl material. Very tricky stuff to sew on. And yet Paula Dorn's PFAFF 230 is doing a brilliant job. Brilliant job. Or a lock stitch, no different. I always say, you know, a machine is running at the top of its game when the lock stitch and the top stitch are equally spectacular. And these are gorgeous lock stitches. Yeah. All right, I think we have one left. Let's do one more, and then I'll do a heavy duty sew off, and then we'll wrap this up. All right. So our last one's going to be interesting. It's going to be a heavy concentration of needle movement in a very isolated space. Look at that last pattern we're going to give a go. It kind of looks like the bird or the McDonald's symbol, but it's very, very compressed as far as the intensity of the stitching it's going to be doing. So this ought to be fun. So we need 832. 832 is our setting for this one. 832. And again, as you can see in the shot, this stitch card, and I got this same stitch card on my channel in a time-lapse video. If you don't have a stitch card, excuse me, if you don't have the benefit of having a stitch card, you can go to the channel under playlists and look for the stitch card playlist, and it will show each one of these settings step by step by step by step by step. And you can fast forward. Let's say you had an interest in one of these others, you could fast forward all the way to that one. It'll show you what the setting is. Yeah, so let's try this one out. So 832, Control A, change that to 8. That was easy. We'll verify, and I'm going to get a drink of water real quick. My throat's getting dry. Control B is on 3. Control D is going to be on 2. So we're good. We're done. Control C is going to move. It's going to be moving. Hopefully you can kind of see Control C moving. I'm going to put in a little bit more of an angle this time. All right, let's sew this last stitch pattern. And certainly we could sew many, 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 many more, but we're going to wrap this up pretty quick. All right, here goes our final stitch pattern. Give a listen to this machine. Watch the dancing over here. Watch the dancing over here. And Paula Dorn is going to be very, very happy when she receives this out in South Carolina. She lives in a town called, if anyone wanted to look it up for fun, it's called, give me a second here. Paula lives in a town called Abbeville, Abbeville, Aville. She lives in Abbeville, South Carolina. If anyone wants to type in something interesting or the distance from Abbeville, South Carolina to Oconto, Wisconsin, how far is this PFAFF 230 going to be traveling when I carefully pack it and I ship it back to her days? Either one of those things you want to share, that would be totally cool. All right, our final decorative ornamental stick. Here we go. There we go. Lovely. Oh yeah, I like that one too. A slightly different appearance to it. And just for fun, because I've been kind of holding this, 230 back, and the whole idea of a live stream premiere is for that machine to go onto the red carpet and to be able to do its dance, right? To be able to do its dance and to really show its stuff. We haven't really been able to show its speed and its strength yet, have we? We haven't really shown its speed and strength yet. So I'd like to do that. Cat King, I think I missed, it was Control E for the feed dogs. Halloween bats, yeah. So real quick clarification on controls again, as we're looking at Paula Dorn's PFAFF 230. And again, it's going to be almost a mirror image of this one back here. It's kind of like the old, you remember the song from, was it the 70s or 60s? Let me get a drink of water real quick and then I won't choke, hopefully. Was it the 60s or 70s? A song, I love the song. It was called Ebony and Ivory. You know, ebony and ivory living together with perfect harmony, or something like, I don't remember what the words are, but you know, these machines functionally are going to be basically the same as far as controls. So the controls, again, as far as Control E up here, Control E is going to be the on and off for the cam function. In other words, if you rotate this toward you and you bring that 0 all the way to this little arrow over here, there's a little arrow. It might be hard to see, but there's a little arrow right there. If you bring it all the way to that arrow, it's going to shut off the cam function of this 230 and render it to being only a straight stitch zigzag machine. The settings on this Control E allow you to determine how frequently that stitch pattern appears. If you like to see the stitch pattern more frequently, like I do, then you set it at the highest setting of 4, or you can migrate it all the way down to 1, and then it'll stretch that pattern way out. So you obviously won't have the frequency, you'll have an elongated pattern instead. And then Control E is also used when you're bobbin winding from the spool of thread. You kind of come around here through this thread guide and then ultimately over to here. And you just engage it by pushing this in and disengaging the clutch on the end, obviously. So that's the secret of the Control E that I was trying to highlight. For feed dog dropping, that's our control right here. This control right here. You can rotate this towards you and drop the feed dogs, or you can push it back to the 3 o'clock position, and then the feed dogs are fully engaged. And again, just as a quick review, this turns the light on and off. I have it off right now because we have issues with LED lights. And then this is our reverse. If we want to sew in reverse, we push this from all the way to the right. We push it to the left. Rotate it to the left, we'll be sewing in reverse. And then finally, this silver one here that has the little red marker, this is our stitch length. And again, for ornamental sewing, we're sewing way, way down right around 0.5. We could go all the way up to 4 and get a much longer stitch, but then we lose our definition. So, and you can see, whereas I was talking about all the wiring at the beginning of the live stream, talking about how this is a lot more turnkey on Maxwell's machine, because all you do is basically you plug it in and she should be good to go. With mine, you can see, kind of show you underneath here. You see the wiring is a lot more complex. motor, the foot controller, when you're hardwiring it to this junction point here. And that's the way that my customer is going to be using it. And that's why I have a foot controller of mine somewhere. I have a foot controller of mine wired. So I'm going to disconnect it, and then all she'll have to do is connect the two leads to her foot controller, and she's off and running. Hopefully that makes sense. I always like to make it as easy for the customer as possible. I want them to be able to get the machine, unpack it, and then begin to enjoy that machine that's been restored in the workshop right away. Oh, those are lovely. Look at those. So what I'm going to do right now, just for fun, for kicks and giggles, is I'm going to give it a little bit more gusto. I won't be at full throttle, but I'm going to go a little bit more for speed, and just show you that if Paula Dorn out in South Carolina, out in Abbeville, South Carolina, wants to race with this puppy, she can certainly do it. So let's give her a little bit more gas this time than we did previously. All right, here we go. We're going to sew the same pattern again, by the way, the same pattern. All right, here we go. That still was not full speed. So did my work on the motor prove to be effective? Yeah, big time. And there's our stitch pattern. Even though we sewed it at a very rapid rate, we still got a lovely, lovely stitch output. We sewed this more like a tortoise. We sewed this more like a rabbit. And they're equally gorgeous. Equally gorgeous. All right, let me do this. Let me grab a little bit of saddle grade leather. We'll buzz down and do a little bit of stitching on that, and then we'll wrap this live stream up. So again, this is kind of what we just did on the live stream. I'll just show it to you again. We did all of these, which is only a fraction. It's only a fraction of the stitch capabilities of this 230. And again, you never add a cam to this machine. The cams are engineered into the machine. All on the live stream. Don't you love it? So much fun. All right, so you all relax for a little bit, chat a little bit more with each other if you'd like. I am going to grab some saddle grade leather, and we'll do a little stitching on that. I want to demonstrate that this 230 is not only able to do the decorative ornamental sewing, but it's also a very, very much a workhorse machine as well. Very, very strong, very, very capable. I'm not going to be able to go crazy on the leather because, again, the needle that I have in here right now is a size 75/11 embroidery needle. This is a needle in the machine right now. And I will break it. I will break it if I try going gangbusters. If I try going gangbusters, this is not a needle that's designed. Number one, it's not designed for leather. Number two, it's not designed for heavy type leather sewing or any heavy grade sewing. It's more for a light sewing. So we're going to see how far we can push this needle without breaking it. All right, y'all, I'll be right back. Give me a sec. Two. I hadn't thought about that. Oh, I do have a piece of saddle grade already. I thought I was going to have to cut some, but I already have some. This is my bag of saddle right here. Let's see if I can use a piece that I already have cut. I've got a single layer of saddle grade. What else do I have? I also wanted to show protected full grain leather as well, because that's a nice hard, heavy sew off to do, especially with an embroidery needle. See if I can get a little piece of protected full grain leather real quick too. Oh, there we go. That'll work. So these are two leathers that I sew quite a bit on this channel. They're a lot of fun to sew. I've got saddle grade leather. I've got protected full grain leather. And protected full grain leather is going to be a leather that they process in a special way with a coating to protect it from staining and also to give it more durability. Saddle grade leather, and depending on what part of the hide it comes from, it's going to have different thicknesses. This thickness right here is probably going to be about 4 to 5 ounces of leather. There's nothing thin about it at all. Now we're going to be trying to sew through this with an embroidery needle, which is always a little bit crazy, isn't it? And then this saddle grade leather is probably a little bit thinner. It's going to be about 3 to 4 ounces of leather. But again, with that coating on there, it kind of galvanizes the surface. It makes it a little bit more difficult to get through it. So what I think I'll do with the protected full grain is I'll sew around the edge as best as I'm able. And that way we can address the issue of control. You know, the fact that you can control the machine, that it's not going to run away from you, that it's not out of control. And instead of just stitching around with a straight or a zigzag stitch, I think we'll do a pattern stitch with it. I'm just going to try to, if we look at these patterns that we already sewed in this range right here, the blue ones, I'd like for you folks to pick the pattern that we're going to sew on the protected full grain leather. And the way we can identify them is the building block one on the far end over here on the left side is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and finally 8 is the last one that we sewed on that bubblegum material. So I'd like for you to type in the live chat. Anyone that wants to type in the live chat, what pattern should we use to try to sew on this protected full grain leather? And instead of just doing a straight or zigzag, we'll actually lay down an ornamental stitch on leather using an embroidery needle. I don't know of anyone else on the internet that's ever done that. Anyone that has even sewn more of a baseline leather, even a garment leather, using an embroidery needle, it's pretty unprecedented, but we're going to do it anyway. So again, pattern 1 through 8. You pick the number, I'll sew it. Help me out, Paula. Paula, which one would be the diamond pattern, dear? Which one is the diamond pattern? Give me a number. Again, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 is on the far right. 1 is on the far left. Just give me a number. Susie said diamond pattern too, but give me a number, ladies, would you? Again, on the far right is 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, I'm gonna stick with these partly because of the material that we're sewing with and because of the needle that we're working with. I don't want to go to some of these others that are going to require a lot more intensity. I think we might break a needle on this leather. So I believe it was Big Joker. Big Joker said 7, which is going to be this one right here on the far right. So let me set that to number 7. So for this one, we're going to use 732. 732. Hopefully you can see that. 732. All right, let's set it up real quick. Okay, 7. That's Control A. Control B, we're already on 3. Control D, we're already on 2. And we're not going to do anything with Control C because that's going to be moving. So let's see if we can stitch this protected full grain leather now around the edges with this ornamental type stitch. And again, this is protected full grain leather. It's not an easy leather to sew at all. And I'll do my best to stay on course, but no guarantees. And again, realize this is only a size 11 needle designed for embroidery work. We are stepping way out of bounds by using a 7511 embroidery needle, so saddle grade leather. But it's how we roll on this channel, isn't it? We're always pushing the limits. We're always pushing the limits. All right, here we go. Let's see what happens. If I break the needle, I've got more. Yeah. All right, here we go. All right, down, 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 down. I'm going to get closer on this so you can watch this. You've already seen the motion of the machine. Let's let you look at the actual stitching as it's going down now. And I think I'll make this our last sew off. Our last sew off. Here we go. I got a little bit cocky at the end and I decided to race a little bit faster, even though we're dealing with a very delicate 7511 embroidery needle and we're dealing with protected full grain leather. Wow. That's pretty cool. That's pretty doggone cool. Let's take a look at this close up. I'm actually going to use, I haven't used my stitch off holder for this entire live stream. We're going to use it right now. And again, this is protected full grain leather. It's not a light garment style leather whatsoever. And that's what we just did. Not the most impressive sewing, but a very impressive machine when it comes to being able to manage even a sew off like this. And if you look at the edge, look at the edge right there, the thickness of this leather. Is that a thin garment leather? No. That's probably, again, about 3 to 4 ounces of protected full grain leather. We just did it with a 7511 embroidery needle. 7511 embroidery needle. And was able to generate, I'm going to move this down even a little bit further so we can get closer. Was able to generate a gorgeous, gorgeous stitch through leather. Again, this is not a leather needle, folks. This is an embroidery needle. Now, if we were to use a leather needle, we could get even better definition, couldn't we? Because it has a special cutting edge designed for going through leather just like this. Folks, that's just crazy. That's just crazy fun is what it is. Let's look at the lock stitch. It'll be a little bit hard to see. It's got a little bit of a nap on here. We kind of get close to it. We can look at some of that stitching popping through the nap of that leather. Notice no loopy-doopy, no loosey-goosey stuff going on. Just gorgeous, gorgeous lock stitching. And again, if I had 3 hands, which I don't, I could pull this back and you'd be able to see the stitching that's being masked right now by some of that nap on the back of the leather. But the fact that we were able to generate something like this with an ornamental stitch on protected full grain leather using an embroidery needle is just super cool. I would encourage you to check the internet, see if anyone else is stitching saddle grade leather or in this type of material, protected full grain leather using an embroidery needle. I don't think you're going to find it. It's not going to happen. But we just did it. We just did it. Big time. Absolutely amazing. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is the PFAFF 230, powered by a 1.3 amp motor. Again, if you missed it in the beginning part, I had to do a lot of work on this motor in order to get it to be able to run like you saw it do during this live stream today. There's so many other stitches that I could demonstrate on this machine, but we really are well out of time. We're at 2 hours and 39 minutes already, and we've run a lot longer than I anticipated we would run. But again, if you're wanting to try any of these other patterns on your model 230 or your 332 or your 338, and you don't have the benefit of this stitch card, search this channel under playlists. You'll find this same stitch card where I took frame by frame pictures of the setting of every single stitch pattern on this stitch card, both for single needle sewing and also dual needle sewing as well. And so you won't be at a hindrance as far as being able to enjoy your PFAFF machine, whether it's a 230, 332, or a 338. You'll be able to enjoy that machine to its fullness. And eventually you'll see Maxwell's model 230 also do its dance as well. Once I address the power issues and other factors that he has that are going on with his machine. And again, this machine came from Denver, Colorado. This machine came from South Carolina. So kind of like I think I saw Susie share in the chat, I am backlogged right now, but it doesn't mean that I'm not wanting to take on new projects. It just means that you as a customer have to be patient. It takes a while. It's only me. I love to always show my friends like Herr Obermeister and Mr. Bean and this sweet little old lady right here that at one point fell off the workbench and I had to totally reassemble her. She busted in about 7 or 8 different sections. You'd never know it now. She looks quite lovely, doesn't she? But all of my friends are here as company for me, but they really don't help. So it's only me. So if you want to send your machine in, I would love it. I love to get machines in. Just be patient with me as I work through all the other machines waiting in a long line. to get to the workbench. And one of the next machines that I'll kind of tease you with a little bit is going to be a Husqvarna Viking European model. I believe it's a CL21A. Came all the way from, see, it is me. It wasn't like a robot or something. It's been me the whole time. So one of the next machines to land on the workbench is going to be a Husqvarna Viking, a Swedish beauty that traveled all the way from London, England, all the way from London, England to the workshop here in Oconto, Wisconsin. So again, all of us have gifts and talents. All of us have gifts and talents. We're all blessed with incredible gifts and talents that a lot of people, no one else has them. My gift and talent is working with vintage sewing machines. And so people are willing to go out of their way, either from Denver, Colorado, or South Carolina, or even London, England. And it's every machine that lands on the workbench, it's a privilege and an honor to work on that machine. It truly is. And it's a privilege and honor to know all of you, because all of you have unique gifts and talents when it comes to what you can contribute to the vintage sewing machine space. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. If you're in a group and they belittle you or make you feel ignorant, or when you step away from it, you feel like, wow, that I don't even know if I can do this. I feel so inadequate. You don't belong in that group. You need to belong here, because myself and Paula and Susie and Sonny and all the other regulars, Dr. T, others, they're going to be a source of encouragement to you and point at your gifts and talents and say, look at how amazing you are. Look at what you can bring to the VSM space. Those are the people you want to hang around with, right? Yeah, it is. You want to hang around in a classroom like this where you say, not only did I learn something new, every time I watch that crazy guy from Oconto, I learned something new, but he always makes me feel like I'm even smarter than the last time, because you are. So never let anybody put you down. Never let anyone, excuse me, make you feel lesser than what you are. You have gifts and talents no one else in the world has, and you can use them here, and you can share them here, and you can inspire all of us. How cool is that? Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you for joining me for this mini sew-off extravaganza with Paula Dorn's really cool PFAFF 230. And if you're from Germany, you would say PFAFF 230. 230 is 230 in German. If you're watching this and you're going, I'm going to use this stitch card from my PFAFF 332, like the one that Scott prepared for Heidi in Switzerland and shipped to her all the way in Switzerland, that 332 that she's sewing shoes in the Swiss Alps with. If you don't believe that that's true, ask one of the leaders and they'll tell you. And you can go to the channel and find the interview I did with Heidi, and you can see her machine doing its dance on a live stream before it was shipped all the way to Switzerland. Her machine in German is 332. 332 is 332. And then finally, if you have a 338, you don't see a lot of 338s. A 338 in German would be 338. 338. Yes, I spit on myself a little bit when I say that. But at any rate, isn't it fun to learn new stuff? It really is. So here are some really cool PFAFF 230s. I'm going to widen the shot so you can see both of them. Maxwell's. Also, you can see Paula Dorn's as well. There they are. And you can enjoy the rest of your weekend. Maybe you're sewing. Maybe you're just outdoors. It's going to be beautiful all over the place. So enjoy it. Yeah, enjoy it. Enjoy your weekend. Yeah. Great leather. Did you remember that? Did you catch that? I tried to sneak that one by. We did the protected full grain leather. Beautiful sewing on this material. We didn't do saddle grade. I wonder if I should try it. Should I try it? Should I try it real quick? Yeah, what the heck? Let's try it. Let's try saddle grade. Saddle grade always makes me nervous, especially using an embroidery needle, for goodness sakes. An embroidery needle. Oh my gosh. An embroidery needle. Ugh. Let's see. which one I can do. Yeah, let's do this one. I'll do the ribbon one. 430. It's on the other side, but on this side, when I'm doing a dual needle, it's 430, the setting instead. 430. We got to change some things. Yeah, 430, 430. 4, that's Control A. 3 is Control B. We're already good. But then we have to take our Control D, which is our stitch width. We've always been on 2 for all those other stitches. Now we all of a sudden need to go to 0. Isn't that weird? Because you would think, how do you sew a decorative ornamental pattern when you're on 0? 0 is straight stitch. But that's what it's telling us to do. See? 430. All right. Well, hopefully the stitch card is smarter than all of us. Let's see what happens. And again, this is saddle grade leather being sewn with a 7511 embroidery needle. 7511 embroidery needle. This is a little bit scary. A little bit scary. Yeah, I'm a little scared, but that's okay. You guys got my back. You got my back. All right, let's see what happens. This should be fun. All right, hopefully I don't break anything. That would be a bummer. All right, here we go. Saddle grade leather. Embroidery needle. They don't even go together. It's like oil and water. Oil and water. What are you sewing, Scott? Oh, I'm sewing saddle grade leather. Oh, you got a leather needle? No. Do you have a universal needle? No. What do you have? I have a size 7511 embroidery needle. Yeah, it's crazy. It's insane. All right, let's have fun. Here we go. Oh, that's fun. Push the limits, baby. Push the limits. Oh my gosh. Goodness gravy, Eloady. That's insane. That's insane. We just sewed saddle grade leather, a decorative ornamental pattern. Granted, it's not the most complex pattern on the face of the earth, and certainly not the most complex pattern that this machine could sew. But nonetheless, we did it with an embroidery needle. That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah. Saddle grade leather, embroidery needle, oil, water, but fun. Here, let me put it on the stitch off holder. I'm trying to hold it and I'm not doing so well. Oh, I was going to end the live stream and then I decided to be crazy. That is with an embroidery needle, folks. Embroidery needle. On leather. Embroidery needle on leather. Scott, you can't sew leather with an embroidery needle. Ah, oops. Wow. Lock stitch. Nothing different. Nothing different. That saddle grade leather really has a nappy nap, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. Well, folks, if you want to see crazy and impossible, you're at the right channel. We do all kinds of fun stuff, don't we? So we didn't, again, do a ton of sewing, but we sewed, where are they? We sewed all of these decorative ornamental patterns during this live stream. If you missed it, you can go back and rewind. We sewed this saddle grade, we sewed this protected full grain leather, me kind of sewing around the edges with a decorative ornamental stitch pattern. Yeah. And then finally, to prove that we are crazy, I sewed saddle grade leather, about 4 ounces, using an embroidery needle executing this semi-complex ornamental stitch on Paula Dorn's Model 230. It's 500 Dicek. Yeah, it's what we do, folks. It's how we roll. There goes my voice. There goes my voice. All right, take care. Have a great weekend, everybody. God bless. And thank you to the moderating team for making everyone feel welcome, kind of minding the shop while I'm over here busy doing things with the machines. And thank you to all of you as you patiently listen to my very convoluted explanation of the electrical differences between the German machines, the Singer machines. You can rewind that and watch it a couple times. Hopefully it proves helpful to you, because you need to understand where those hot zones are if you're going to be attempting any wiring so you can do it safely. Okay, take care, everybody. God bless. All right. Voice. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. And God bless.